manageable without muddying up the poster too much. We really wanted to focus on giving some clear conclusions, being that health measures in children is a very dense field where there's already a lot of information. People are very familiar with the background and a lot of the methods that are used. So conclusions was our main focus, which is why ratio-wise we made sure that the conclusions portion took up the majority in comparison to the background, the objectives, etc. And then the results are displayed quite clearly, and on a large poster, they're a little bit clearer than they are here on the electronic display. But you can see the correlations come through really clearly, and at any point where there is a non-significant or a significant value, that's clearly identified on the poster as well. And then just really clean lines where like all the titles line up, all the charts line up, they match perfectly as you can do in PowerPoint. Fairly simple.
My poster is the big one with lots of green on it over there. So completely out of what I normally do here. But I also run adapted sport groups for children with a colleague of mine here. So this was something that looked at how the college would have to change in order to have children with special needs attend post-secondary education. So what we did is we created a Blackboard site that would basically be able to have their information and follow them through their career. Something like that exists in elementary through high school, but it doesn't exist in post-secondary. So this was something that was a suggestion of a colleague of mine. So the big piece of the poster was to actually show what that did, because obviously I wasn't going to be doing the presentation with a computer next to me that anyone would see. So we took screenshots of the site and then put them in the middle and simply described it around. It's generally considered to be unconventional because it's not sort of scientifically based. It's more just explaining and showing a system. So that's the general idea of the poster. The main points regarding the system that were things that people had highlighted as questions that would probably be asked during the presentation were put in the colored sections on the side so that their answers were already there. They wouldn't have to address those questions.
So my poster is actually just right up the front here. And what I did was, as part of my continuous appointment term to become a tenured faculty member here, I was involved in the Excellence in Teaching and Learning initiative put forth by the CTL. It's also called the EdL program. There's a series of modules that it really culminates in the capstone project. And I did a capstone project where I actually changed the way I was teaching within my classroom a little bit. And then I did a survey in my course to see how my students felt about the change. And then I made the poster on that. So mine's a little bit scientific in the fact that I've got some more anecdotal, I guess, based data as opposed to actual scientific data. But I really laid it out with my rationale at the beginning, what change I made to my classroom, what the differences were. All the little pie charts show survey results, and then basically a big questionnaire or a summary of the questionnaire that's from all the little pie charts so people can get a sense of what people liked and what people didn't like about my classroom change initiative.
Thank you. And then I'll just speak really quickly to the one, the tall portrait one on the side there. That was a poster done by Kristen Gilbranson, and she's a nursing faculty member in the BSCN program. And she looked at blended learning in a nursing research course. So she took the nursing research course and she blended it as a replacement blend, taking out some of the face-to-face and replacing it with online. What she did with her poster is she created it as an infographic using PictoChart, which meant that she then had to pull it out of PictoChart and cut it up to turn it into a poster, because otherwise it would have printed as 2 feet wide by like 10 feet long. So hers had some different technological challenges, but she really wanted to do a very graphic display of what her students thought of the blended research course that she redeveloped. So that's how she did hers. Any questions or thoughts, comments? Hi, Brenda.
I have a couple of questions. I did a poster probably 16 years ago, and it was a little bit an arduous process at that time, just because of the capabilities of the programs that I was using. So are all of these done in Publisher, or what are they done in?
There's a mix.
Mine's done in PowerPoint.
PowerPoint?
Mine was in PowerPoint as well.
Okay.
This was in PowerPoint. Oh, I thought it was Publisher. Okay.
PowerPoint, yeah.
Did it? Either of you any use anything else?
All the PowerPoint.
Kristen's was in PictoChart. I have one. We didn't have another board for it. I did it in Publisher. If it doesn't, it looks pretty much like the rest. It's just a different, you know. But I actually used a template that Sona had made, so it was easier. I didn't have to start from scratch in Publisher. I didn't find Publisher that easy to use. If I were doing one again, I'd probably use PowerPoint because I'm more familiar with it. But
So that's what I used to way back when, but I really didn't find it that user friendly. But I wasn't working from a big template. So
Right.
Yeah.
And really, it's what you're comfortable with. But the Document Center does recommend not using Word. So PowerPoint is fine, Publisher is fine. With Word, they say it's just not conducive to that large scale format that you're looking for. It's more regular document size. So find something that works for you. There are other pieces of software available too. If you're on a Mac, there's
Swift Publisher.
Swift Publisher is one. There's one called Lucid Press, which is just online, that, you know, where everything's in the cloud. So there are some different options out there. And the big thing is just to become familiar with, there are a few basic things, and when I'm going to go through kind of a top 10 things to consider when making a poster, and when I speak to that software portion, I'll highlight a few other things as well, for sure.
And are you going to talk about templates? Because that was my other area.
I can certainly touch on that. Yeah,
Okay,
for sure. So
Thanks.
Any other questions before Sona gives us her top 10? Well, my question is, like, how difficult was the learning curve when you each went to make your posters?
I think the biggest thing, like Ken said, the results were what was really important for his. I think that's the biggest piece is what's the most important thing you want people, it's a poster, so people are supposed to look at it. What do you want them to see? And as soon as you can figure out what's the most important thing you want them to see, then you can build everything else around it.
I think as well, I mean, I've made, I don't know, 20 or 30 posters in my life, conferences. And the biggest lesson I've learned is that when you've got a poster, you might not always be there to explain it. So you do want to have a bit of a story there so somebody can get the gist of what you're trying to represent. So you really have to put yourself in the shoes of that person that's going to walk up and see the poster. And again, like you had said, Robin, what are the important things that you really want the person to understand? What's that take-home message? And then to arrange it in a way that's easy to follow. So somebody's not trying to scan all over the place, figuring out what the message is.
I think there's a demographic component too, just in the sense that as for mine, I was presenting that at a conference that was being evaluated for awards and stuff like that. You have to include everything all the way through from your methods to your references very, very particularly, and you just start to get really full. Whereas when I look at something like this or like a capstone project poster, you look at the demographic you're presenting to, that's a perfect way. Like I love just the way that looks, but at the same time, it violates 100% the rules that I would follow to do my poster. But if I were to do that for a capstone project, nobody's going to look at that and really feel like they understand what I did in my classroom. So
know your audience.
Yeah, that demographic component of who is actually going to be looking at it's really key. Are you at a conference full of academics where they're going to stand there for 20 minutes and read through every single detail? Or are you in front of colleagues at Red Deer College where they just want to get the gist of it in pretty much 60 seconds or less and go about their days?
And so we created these posters not necessarily with any specific audience in mind yet, and we just wanted, Marissa wanted the experience of putting together a poster but because this was part of a community-based project, we, at some point they'll go back to the community organization and they'll be used there, so a completely different audience, like not an academic, not a what audiences that we're familiar with. So making sure that the information there not only captures the comprehensiveness of the project, but the the voice of the information that participants in that particular project in a respectful way, but also in sort of eye-catching way, so to get people to look at it. So.
And I guess for me, one of the things would be to know the disciplinary conventions of your area. Posters started with sciences and social sciences, so they have this, many of them have a very traditional, there's 3 sections, there's the abstract, the methodology, like very much is what many of what you're seeing here. Posters have moved into other disciplines. So for instance, in humanities, you might see a poster that's a graphic novel. So it's cartoons with speech bubbles. That will work in humanities. If you try and present that at a science conference, they will not be impressed. So they will think you're weird. So there's more resources coming out for posters for disciplines other than sciences and social sciences, but you need to know where you're presenting and what they're looking for. All right, let's turn it over to Sona and her top 10, her top 10 countdown.
I'm trying to
Your head is comfortable.
I can do that. I can move over here to that.
So I
I bet you better go than
Well,
me.
No, yeah. Oh, no, it's not long enough for me to, oh, maybe I can make it.
Trapped.
I'm trapped. Okay, so I'm going to go through basically a top 10 of best practices for creating a poster. It's not necessarily in any particular order. So let's start with number 10. So number 10, first off, make a plan. So we talked a little bit about knowing the requirements for where you will be presenting your poster. They might say you need X number of words. You might need to include certain aspects, such as your self-kit. Format, size, all of those types of details as well. They might have this particular word count. In some cases, one instructor we're working with, 800 words was the max word count for her poster. As well, check timelines, and you want to work backwards. And so if you're getting something printed, for example, at the Document Center, they have a minimum 1-week turnaround time, and they cannot do rush orders because it's printed on their big poster, on big rolls of paper, and they can't just jump you into the queue like with other documents. So make sure, working backwards from when you need to fly or leave from your conference, you allow that time for printing and then allow time for development, but also proofreading and having someone else take a look at your work as well. Because that's really helpful to have an audience. And you spoke about that poster needs to kind of speak for itself. Having somebody who hasn't seen it can help you achieve that goal, because once you work on it a lot, it all starts looking the same, right?
Tamil, did you have a question?
Yeah, and this might come up later in your template pieces, but just having not made one of these posters myself before, like are there recommendations for the size of the font you should be using? Because I'm assuming you don't want to keep printing out your final version like you would a rough draft of something else, because that could get pretty pricey.
For sure, there are recommendations, and I will speak to the size of text because that is an important consideration for sure. And so think about your poster like being a visual or illustrated abstract. So when you think of an abstract is pretty concise, but it covers all the key points of, let's say, an article that you might be reading. So you might have, your purpose, methodology, results, everything kind of nicely encapsulated. So what you're doing is you're taking that information and visualizing it, and then adding visuals where appropriate to help illustrate that story, and using a design that would create that flow, basically. Also, something else I want to say about that. Headings, sections, anything you can do to kind of help visually break out can help your reader make sense of that data as well. So that's something that I would recommend if you are creating a poster for, like, say you haven't written a paper, but you've done some research, just try writing an abstract first. and then move into the design process. So when you move into that design process, storyboard. So you can do this on paper, you can just sketch out kind of how you want your poster to look. There are apps you can use that will help you, move shapes around, that type of thing. But it really helps them to start you thinking about how you might want to lay it out. Because while I see most of the posters in here are landscape, we do have one portrait poster, and maybe that works better for the type of information that you need to present, because maybe the flow will go better going vertically than going horizontally. So something to consider as well. Some posters are square, that's another size consideration. When thinking about the size, however, do keep in mind if you're printing at the document center, they do have a 42-inch max going one way because that's the limitation of their roll. The other way you can be as big banner if you want, but you have to pay lots of money. And roughly for a 4x3 poster, it's about $60 at the doc center, roughly, just depending on, there are some options you can select.
And 4x3 is pretty standard, but if you are planning a poster for a specific conference, they will often have those requirements for you. So you don't want to show up at a conference where the posters are supposed to be 36 inches by 24 inches with a poster that's 48 by 36.
And sometimes their requirements are based on, they have certain poster boards or presentation panels that you'll be putting your posters up on. Edit, edit, edit. So you're not trying to put your whole life story on your poster, depending on where you're presenting. So of course, think about your audience, but depending on where you're presenting, a lot of times, in a lot of the poster sessions I've been to, it's kind of like a wine and cheese, mix and mingle. People are walking around and they're maybe not going to spend 10, 15 minutes wanting to read everything on your poster. So less is more. In addition, you can, one of the things that they suggest is walking about 5 feet away from your poster and taking a look and seeing if you can read the text. So this is where that text size comes into play. So they recommend approximately 80 to 100 size font for a title. It kind of depends slightly depending on the font you use, because some fonts will render differently than others. That's just a general guideline. For the body of your text, about 30 point minimum is suggested. So I don't know, I would imagine most of these, like I can read them from far away, so they must be.
I find 30 small, but I think my eyes are getting old. So I tend to go for more like 32, 34.
Right.
But
yeah, and you might, I mean, that's the minimum that is recommended. Headings, you might want to make a little bit bigger, or you might want to bold them or highlight them in another way, just again to show the breakout of your paper. In terms of fonts, it is suggested that you limit to a couple of fonts rather than kind of going overboard and using all sorts of different styles. And it also is nice to find those fonts that complement each other and that are not too similar. So if the font I use up here is very similar to the font I'm using down here, it's going to, you might think, well, it looks the same, but not, and something's quite off. So that's something to think about. Don't use all caps. It's kind of like yelling, kind of like in texting. And in terms of colors, keep it simple there as well. It's recommended to constrain to a color palette of a couple of colors, maybe 2 or 3 that go together. We will have a link to a handout where we have a link to a couple of different websites that help you choose color palettes. It takes into consideration complementary colors, adjacent colors, like those types of things, so that you know that you have a harmonious use of color, basically. And less is more or less. So what happens to all that extra stuff that you want to tell people about? Consider a takeaway. So you can have a handout maybe at your poster. If you don't know how many people are going to come, maybe just have a link or a QR code or something that people can interact with and have that information right away when they leave. So the other part too is that typically for a poster session, you will be there with your poster. Not always, but you may also have additional things to have a conversation about with the people looking at your poster. Right. Create a compelling title. So your title is your opportunity to catch people's eyes. Also, if you are submitting a paper for a conference, your title and your name and your institution affiliation might be one of the only things listed somewhere. Maybe there'll be a bit of an abstract, maybe not. So you want to be able to entice people with what your title is, but you also want it to be descriptive enough that it does help tell a story about what your poster is, like what will your reader expect. So big and short is what's suggested. Make your title big and don't have lines and lines. So try to limit your title to a line if you can, or 2 lines max, because it does take up real estate on your poster. And typically, and you'll know kind of going around with some of the posters, you'll find names of the poster creator as well as their affiliation. Usually that's a requirement somewhere, so it doesn't necessarily have to be at the top. That's more of a traditional placement of that information. Make it visually interesting. So all of the posters that I've seen have had graphs or graphics, charts, pictures, colors. So there's visual interest in all of them. So that's what we're looking for. That's what's suggested. Wherever you can with data, if it's possible, try to put it into a visual chart format, because it is easier and quicker to interpret that than reading a chart with numbers. But again, it depends on where you're presenting and what the purpose of that data is, because sometimes it's not the format that would be best for that. The other thing, you'll notice my little magnifying glass on this picture, and you see the little bumps. Ensure that your images are of adequate resolution. So recommended is about 200 to 300 DPI, which basically means that if you blow up that poster really big, it's not going to look grainy and pixelated, because nothing looks worse than a pixelated picture. One of the ways you can take a look to see if that's happening is, so create your poster, view your poster at 100% on the screen. So whether you're in PowerPoint or PDF, whatever, you can change it so you can see your poster at 100% size. It's going to look massive. You're not going to be able to see the whole thing, but you'll be able to kind of scan around and see, well, is anything looking pixelated and jaggy?
Because that's an important thing to note. When you're making a poster, you don't make it on, if you're using PowerPoint and it's an 8.5 by 11 inch PowerPoint slide when it prints, you actually have to change that to 48 inches by 36 inches. It blows it up. Then you shrink down you minimize that so that you can see the whole thing. You do stuff, and then you can blow it up again. But you don't want to try and print something to 3 by 4 that was really made to be printed as 8.5 by 11.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because really the very first thing you should be doing when you open a PowerPoint or Publisher or whatever is set your page size to however big you want your poster to be. Because if you keep it at that 8.5 by 11 and realize later and then change your page size, all your stuff's going to be really, really tiny and like right in the middle, and you're going to have a sea of white page. And then it's just a pain to fix it after. So first thing, change your page size, save your document, and then keep working on your poster. Good tip. That has happened before numerous times. And then the other thing you can do to make it visually not only interesting, but also to kind of indicate flow, you might use judicious use of arrows or other indicators to help your reader kind of figure out how they should be reading your poster. Like Allison mentioned, there are some traditional layouts. So if you have like a 3-column layout, people do read from left to right. So when I'm reading this, I know that I'm going to be reading it this way, right? So that I don't necessarily need to put an arrow, but if there's anything that's maybe a little bit different, arrows can help with that flow. The other thing to think about too is that if you know where you're presenting is going to be quite crowded and multiple people might be wanting to look at your poster, then it's really useful to make it so, okay, if I start reading here, then I can keep reading here, somebody else can start. But if I have something that's maybe circular, I'm reading here, and then I'm gonna have to go back this way, and then the next person's gonna start, and then we're gonna be like dancing, right?
And then there are wine spills.
And then the wine spills. So think about multiple people looking at the poster at the same time. It could happen, it just depends on the situation, the crowdedness of the place where you're presenting. Else on that, arrows, labels, and graphs. So typically when you're creating graphs, you are going to most likely be using Excel or some other spreadsheet type of software, because then you can put your data in, have it chart your data, and then you can export that as an image into your poster. Because PowerPoint really is not going to, I mean, you can try drawing in your circles, but it's not going to be the best. When you do add charts, it's great to have some sort of labels of what the person is seeing. Just to, again, if you're not there at your poster, you want your reader to be able to see, oh, well, this chart is results of blah, 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 right? And there may be a scale or that type of thing as well. So be sure just to proofread before you print, because it is costly to print, so you don't want to find that typo after you've spent your $60. But not only that, there is maybe not even time to have it reprinted because of that 1 week time. So a couple of things you can do that we recommend. So one is just print it out on 8.5 by 11 and then proofread that on paper, because you will probably catch things that you might not see on the screen. The other thing is, if you really want to see what your poster might look like on a large scale, just in terms of the sizing and as well as your text, you can print it out in PDF. Once you PDF it, you can change it so in paper handling, you print it on multiple sheets of paper, and it usually about 20 sheets or 25 sheets. You'll print it all. It's basically like a little mosaic you put together, tape it up, and then you can put it up, and you have a pretty good idea of what your poster looks like. If you're really that worried, or even you can print a part of it. So just to give your a sense of, okay, well, my title's probably big enough, my headings, my body, text body, nothing's pixelated. So that is another thing that you can do as well. And when you're submitting your poster to the Document Center, they do want it in PDF format. So they don't want your publisher file, they don't want your PowerPoint file. They want it basically print ready as a PDF. And they do recommend viewing that PDF at 100% scale. Again, just to make sure that your pictures aren't pixelated, everything lines up and everything. Because if it doesn't, and they bring it up on the screen at the Doc Center, and you're like, oh, well, that doesn't look right, then you're gonna have to go back, and take it back again. So prepare an elevator pitch. So it's great to have, in addition to your poster, have a little 30-second spiel about it. So when you are standing in front of your poster and you want to entice people, you have that little bit of a hook that you can chat with, instead of like, oh, I don't know what to say about my poster. And then the other thing I like to do as well is just, so I have my 30-second elevator speech, but I might have maybe a 3 to 4 minute spiel that I practice about my research and everything else, so that if people ask me questions, I will have everything kind of at the tip of my tongue and answer those questions. Your success. Presenting your poster, have a glass of something. Whatever you want to be. Great. Anything to add, Allison?
Are there questions or comments from the audience or from the panelists?
I was just going to say, for that proofreading stage, what I did was I just projected it in real size onto a whiteboard.
Mm-hmm.
And you can just measure it out. It gets it almost to the exact size that it'll be on the printout, and then you can edit and that sort of thing. You can have people come in and just edit using their whiteboard markers and make their changes. You can, if you have multiple people edit it, you can have one person come in, edit it, take a picture, then erase their edits, and then have somebody else do it and compare them side by side. It's pretty easy, and it saves you some of the printout issues.
That's a great idea.
And I think the value of having other people look at it. because I will miss my own typos, but I will catch everybody else's.
I'm pretty
So-
sure mine still has the word ass in it, actually.
Oh,
Instead of ass, I'm pretty sure
Oh.
the one that's up here, the one I presented still has ass in it, because it's one of those things where the same people looked at it the whole time, and it was like proofread 4 times, but then we got to the conference and it wasn't until we put it up at the conference, like, it says ass, right? You see it right away, and
That's all right, when it's too late, right?
yeah,
Big white out pen.
yeah.
But even sending it to somebody who is completely unfamiliar with the work, like I send stuff to an English teacher. She has no idea what it's about, but she's gonna catch the grammar errors and she's gonna catch the spelling errors.
And I realized I never addressed templates, so there actually are templates out there, if you Google post, poster sessions, a lot of institutions have put out templates. I guess we could create, and actually this was suggested by the document center. Do we notice? Oh, the document center, when I'm chatting with him this week about posters, because I wanted to make sure that I'm giving you guys the correct information, suggested, if you create in PowerPoint and Publisher like a template of a general size, I mean, it can be tweaked after, at least to start off with, everything is kind of, if your PDF it would be suitable for printing.
I think that's useful because I imagine the more you do of them, then you go crazy, but if you're just starting out, it's sometimes you just want this is a template that is gonna be it's gonna look
inoffensive.
Yeah, it's not gonna be too crazy.
But you don't want to feel restricted though by the template, right? So, and certainly we can make some available, but yeah, I think posters are very creative and they're very individual. So, I mean, yes, you will see a lot of traditional 3-column posters, but there are a lot that are online that I've seen that are very different and interesting.
And one of the links we've given you is to Vanderbilt University, and they have a section on posters for the humanities where they have very different poster styles, which, you guys, if you're coming from a traditional science background, might look at them and go, whoa, that is wrong. But for people who aren't used to the traditional science method, it's very appealing to them. So the idea of a graphic novel or speech bubbles that do textual analysis, things like that. So there's more and more options as posters are spreading to different disciplines as a visual way of representing research.
So I just changed the slide. This link, bit.ly/academic poster, will take you to, well, mine has lots of scribbling around it, but basically it's a checklist. And we have 3 sections. We have one section on design, one on the content, and one on delivery. And then as well, there is, maybe Alice will bring it up. There are also some links to some general resources and some discipline-specific resources as well. So that would be something that might be useful. Sorry, I should have made it a link.
It's not copying. Give me a second. Sorry.
Or we can type it in. BIT.ly.
Sure.
Academic poster. I tried to make the URL quite simple yet effective. Unless I get to bit.ly. Oh yeah, there we go.
There we go.
One mouse. That mouse doesn't work. Okay. So yeah, so there's a section on design, content, delivery, and then several links to different sites. So this one I'll show you because it is very different. So this is the Vanderbilt site. And so she has examples of the very traditional science type posters. But then she has these other examples, which I'll just, instead of clicking on, I'll just make them bigger. Close reading of a text, where you have the text in the center and speech bubbles around it doing the analysis. Or respond to a previous thought. So there's a misconception in the discipline and you're responding to it. Inductive analysis or argument, filling the gaps, she calls this one. Intersections, and then this one, which I will click on because I love that. So graphic novel type presentation. Again, not gonna fly at a chemistry conference probably.
I don't know, I think it can be work.
Probably working.
Put some lab coats on.
Jackets on, yeah, beakers in their hands, look at them.
Well, or that could become part of your poster, right? So if you have a more traditional poster, maybe in one panel, you have something like this to have kind of a different perspective, or quotes or conversation.
So any final thoughts from the members of the panel or from the audience?
I have a quick question. It's more of a tech question though. I really like that idea about having that, because I know when we did that Google series, they gave us the tiny links, right? So you can put the link up and people go. Is there a program so that you can create your QR code?
Yeah, there definitely is, and good question. So it is actually included on that on the handout. Yeah, under the takeaways section, we've identified 2 separate sites that you can create QR codes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or thoughts? Where are you guys taking posters? UFC? What discipline?
I'm in psych and I'm also doing a sociology project. So independent studies that we presented with. Psych and soci as well.
Okay. When is that coming up for?
We don't know yet. Usually sometime April, May.
Okay.
They haven't given us the date yet, or if it is there, I can't find it.
Great.
So you're trying to work on a poster, but you're not sure when it is?
Yeah.
That makes the backdating of it really difficult.
Well, we know soci, I guess. So if you're not there, end of May for soci.
So work with the earliest date. Maybe take a few days away from that and then work on that date. All right, well, I think that wraps up our session, and we'd like to thank you all for coming and learning about posters and sharing with us. All right, thank you to our panelists for sharing their posters and their design processes with us. Great, thank you.
You need a camera operator. You need a camera operator.
You need to do a last
Yeah.